November 2024, the Dutch government sold its last major stake in ABN AMRO, quietly ending 400 years of state involvement in Dutch banking. The country that invented the stock exchange, the central bank, and the modern corporation was stepping back from the industry it created. 17 million people, a landmass smaller than Maryland. And yet, for 80 years, this tiny patch of reclaimed swamp ran the planet. That's not the first time a small nation rewrote the global economy, and we already know how the story ends. History doesn't repeat, it patterns. This one is called the Merchant Republic Trap. A tiny nation invents the financial system of its century, dominates the world, and then gets eaten by the very machine it built. Start with Venice, 1380. A city of lagoons and wooden pilings, barely 100,000 people. Venice controlled the spice routes from Alexandria to the Rhine. The Venetian ducat, first struck in 1284, held its gold content for over 500 years. Think about that. 5 centuries of monetary discipline from a city you can walk across in an hour. Venice invented double-entry bookkeeping. It invented maritime insurance. The Arsenal, its state shipyard, could assemble a fully rigged warship in a single day by 1570, an assembly line 400 years before Henry Ford. At its peak, Venice's merchant fleet dwarfed every rival in the Mediterranean. Then the Portuguese rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1498. The spice monopoly cracked. Venice didn't collapse overnight. It bled out over 2 centuries, richer each decade in paintings and palaces, poorer each decade in ships and soldiers. By 1797, Napoleon took the city without a fight. The same pattern appeared 200 years later in Amsterdam. The Dutch Republic declared independence from Spain in 1581. Within a generation, this swamp of 7 provinces, total population around 1.5 million, was running global trade. In 1602, merchants in Amsterdam founded the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the VOC, the first publicly traded joint stock corporation in history. Adjusted for inflation, historians estimate its peak valuation at roughly $7 trillion in today's money, larger than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google combined. That same year, 1602, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange opened. 7 years later, the Bank of Amsterdam, the first true central bank. Also in 1609, a merchant named Isaac Lemaire invented short selling by betting against VOC shares. He lost. But the technique survived. Why did tiny Amsterdam win? Geography forced cooperation. You cannot drain a polder alone. Religious tolerance pulled in capital that nowhere else wanted. Sephardic Jews expelled from Iberia. Huguenots fleeing France after 1685. No absolute monarch meant no royal confiscations. Calvinist discipline turned thrift into a civic religion. But the Golden Age was built on violence. In 1621, VOC Governor Jan Pieterszoon Cohen landed on the Banda Islands to enforce the nutmeg monopoly. Of roughly 15,000 Bandanese, fewer than 1,000 survived. The spice in your kitchen cabinet has a body count. By 1670, the Dutch merchant fleet was larger than those of England, France, Spain, and Portugal combined. Per capita income in Holland was the highest on earth and would not be surpassed anywhere for nearly 200 years. Then came 1672, the rampjaar, the disaster year. France invaded from the south. England attacked at sea. The bishops of Münster and Cologne struck from the east. 4 enemies at once. The Dutch opened the dikes and flooded their own country to stop the French. They survived. But the mood never recovered. And that's where it gets uncomfortable, because the Dutch didn't fall in 1672. They fell slowly for the next 128 years while still believing they were winning. Why does this keep happening? Why do the nations that invent a new economic system always lose control of it? 3 forces working together. First, financialization eats innovation. When an economy learns to make money from money, The smartest people stop building ships and start trading paper claims on ships. Dutch capital in 1700 wasn't funding new trade routes, it was funding English debt. By 1780, roughly 40% of the British national debt was held by Dutch investors. Amsterdam was financing its own replacement. Second, the institutions that won become the institutions that block. The VOC started as a startup, 17 directors, aggressive, innovative. By 1700, it was a bureaucratic monopoly, choked by patronage, its officers skimming from every shipment. Historians estimate corruption inside the VOC cost the company more than piracy, shipwrecks, and warfare combined. The vehicle of dominance became the vehicle of decay. Think of it like an immune system that starts attacking the body. The rules that protect the winners eventually prevent new winners from emerging. Third, imperial overhead. A hegemon pays for the system it built. The navies, the forts, the bribes, the subsidies. Dutch military spending as a share of GDP stayed crushing long after the economic base shrank. Tax rates in Holland by 1750 were roughly 3 times those in Britain. The Dutch middle class, the engine of the Golden Age, was being taxed into extinction to maintain a dominance that no longer existed. And beneath all three, a psychological force. Call it late-stage smugness. The belief that your success is the natural order. In 1720, Dutch pamphlets still described Amsterdam as the center of the world. London had already passed them. They couldn't see it because they refused to look. That's the mechanism. Invention calcifies into extraction. Extraction demands protection. Protection bankrupts the inventor. Now look around. In 2024, the United Kingdom's financial services sector contributed roughly 12% of total tax receipts. The City of London employs over 500,000 people in finance alone. But British industrial output as a share of GDP has fallen from around 30% in 1970 to under 10% today. Britain makes money from money. Sound familiar? As of early 2026, Singapore manages an estimated $5.5 trillion in assets under management, extraordinary for a city-state of roughly 6 million people. Its sovereign wealth funds, GIC and Temasek, rank among the largest on Earth. Singapore has become the Amsterdam of Asia. Tiny, tolerant enough to attract global capital, disciplined and increasingly dependent on being a clearinghouse rather than a producer. The United States shows a later stage variant. Financial services and real estate now exceed 20% of US GDP, larger than manufacturing. The S&P 500's 10 largest companies trade at valuations that assume permanent dominance. American military spending in 2025 surpassed $900 billion, more than the next 9 countries combined. The imperial overhead is real. And then there's the VOC signal. Watch for the moment when a dominant company stops innovating and starts lobbying. When its revenue comes from defending its position rather than expanding it. Several of the largest American tech firms now spend more on share buybacks and legal defense than on research in their original product lines. The VOC stopped exploring and started protecting around 1720. It limped on for 79 more years before it was formally dissolved in 1799, bankrupt. One more echo. In 2024, the Dutch central bank, the modern descendant of the Bank of Amsterdam, moved its gold reserves out of Amsterdam to a reinforced facility in Zeist, citing security concerns in a destabilized Europe. Quiet, almost unnoticed. The same city that once stored the world's bullion is now moving its own vault inland. The pattern hasn't stopped. It's just wearing new clothes. Can the pattern be broken? Honestly, rarely. Venice didn't escape. Amsterdam didn't escape. Spain didn't escape. The one partial exception is Britain itself, which managed something unusual, a managed handoff to the United States between roughly 1914 and 1956, ending symbolically at Suez. Britain kept its institutions, its language, its legal system embedded in the successor. It lost the throne, but kept the furniture. What made Britain different? It had a cultural and linguistic heir ready to inherit. It lost 2 world wars worth of wealth fast enough that denial wasn't possible. And critically, it reinvested late-stage capital into science and universities rather than pure finance. Cambridge, Oxford, the Medical Research Council. That bought relevance after power faded. The Dutch tried none of that. They kept believing until Napoleon walked in 1795 and ended the Republic by decree. So the off-ramp exists. It's narrow. It requires admitting you've already lost while you still have something to trade. Pattern confirmed. The merchant republic trap doesn't punish weakness. It punishes the refusal to notice that strength has already moved elsewhere. Now I want your take. Do you think this same pattern is unfolding today, or is this time truly different? Tell me your perspective in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.